Israel has said it has intensified its operations in northern Gaza. Even as Israel continues its airstrikes and on-ground operations in northern Gaza, Moscow has turned host for Iran and Hamas. Leaders, Iran's deputy foreign minister has met with the Hamas leader in Russia. As per reports, ceasefire delivery of aid to Gaza were Iran's priority issues to be discussed with Hamas. Iran has reportedly also discussed lifting the blockade and also called Russia's act of host as support for terrorism. It's not yet clear whether Russia was present during the talks between Iran and Hamas. However, Russian deputy foreign minister has reportedly met with the Iranian and Hamas leaders, calling for the release of hostages. Russia's move as mediator comes amidst its own war with Ukraine. The big question is, why is Russia playing mediator, and what next in the Israel-Hamas war? Joining us at this point is Ambassador Veena Sikri, former diplomat. We also have Major General A.K. Sivach, former head of Territorial Army, joining us live. Pathikrit Pain, foreign affairs expert, joins us as well. We also have Professor D.K. Giri, international affairs expert, joining us live too. Let me make a start with you, Ambassador Sikri, on what you make of the fact that Russia suddenly has decided to play mediator.
Yeah, it's certainly a very surprising development, but I think we must all recognize that the whole world is in one big geopolitical churn. Alliances, friends, everything is breaking up and changing. And Russia is trying very hard to stay relevant in this process. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia has come in for a lot of global flack, but the Middle East is very important. Russia has, in fact, been developing its relations with Israel in recent years. But right now, it is trying to see how relevant it can be, if it can play mediator at all. But I think that it is very interesting that first Russia invited Hamas to Moscow, and secondly the Iranian deputy foreign minister turned up as well. This seems to belie what had earlier been said. Even President Biden has said that he's not very sure how much Iran has been helping Hamas to arm up and to prepare itself for the violent terrorist attack it committed on 7th October. So I think this does show that the Hamas-Iranian relationship is alive and well, and that Iran wants to keep it going. Now the question is that Russia too is thinking that it could play a mediator with Hamas and Iran on their side. For me, the biggest question here is that, number one, the terrorist violence committed by Hamas on 7th October. And number two, Hamas as a terrorist organization, does it represent the people of Palestine? This is the big question. And how can Hamas be speaking on behalf of Palestine, whether with Russia or Iran or anybody else? Because we know that in the Gaza Strip, it is maybe as far back as 2006 that any kind of elections were held and the Hamas took control. Since then, there have been no elections and only a very repressive regime, as we have seen. Even the aid that Hamas received has been turned into weaponry and tunnel building and all kinds of things. So this is the big question today, that who represents the Palestinian people? All of us are very strongly in support of a two-state solution in this region, with safe and secure and negotiated borders between Israel and Palestine. But now the key question is on who's going to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, their voice is very muted right now, but they have been very active in their representation of the people of Palestine. So I think that the world has to decide this question first. But in the meanwhile, the very fact that Hamas and Iran are together in Moscow says its own story about Hamas's source of support and how Iran continues to stay relevant. They are talking about the release of hostages. This is a very important issue for Israel and the world. But surely these discussions on the release of hostages are also happening with Qatar. We know that Qatar has been very active in this connection, and America has been talking to Qatar as well. So this whole question of who is linked to whom and who is talking on whose behalf is really confused and befuddled at the moment.
Right. Let me also take that across to Major General A.K. Sivach. Major General A.K. Sivach, what do you believe would have transpired in this meeting between leaders of Iran and leaders of Hamas? This is a meeting which is being watched very closely, not just by the Israelis, but by many others in the world.
Yeah, Uday, you see, first of all, they not denying the fact that it's a very strange development. Remember that as far as Israel is concerned, it was maintaining good relation with Russia. In fact, Russia relationship has grown up quite well with Israel in last about 2 decades. But certainly after the Russia-Ukraine war, now you find it that Russia-Ukraine war, Israel has taken a line which was slightly pro-Ukraine, though it refused to give any weapon to Ukraine. What has happened, and during that time, the Russia-Iran relation has improved tremendously. Iran has given a lot of weapons to the Russia, and especially the Shahid drone, which has given to Russia, has been a game changer. And this has been a force multiplier. And over a period of time, Russia-Iran has become almost an ally. And now Russia calling Hamas as well as Iran to negotiate is quite a strange thing. What Ambassador was trying to convey, that every country is trying to show they are relevant in this scenario today, that there's churning effect taking place. But certainly 2-3 things stand out very categorically. As far as Hamas is concerned, it is a proxy of Iran. Iran is the one which has supported Hamas as well as Hezbollah. The weapons which have been given to Hamas are given by Iran. It is basically encouraged to do what they have done on 7th October. So as far as Iran is concerned, one can say openly that it has an imprint on Hamas, both Hamas as well as Hezbollah. Now it trying to play a mediator as far as Russia is concerned. Now the question comes, is Israel ready to accept anything which will come from Russia until they criticize Hamas? They have refused to criticize Hamas directly. And which is the main reason, for any negotiation to build up, that anyone and everyone has to first sort of criticize the action which was done by Hamas on 7th October. It was a genocide, it was a terrorist action which was done. But certainly, in case the effort is being made in Russia, and where is Hamas as well as Iran are talking to each other, so that, 2-3 things which stand out. One is that a truce to be established and the humanitarian aid to go basically in Gaza Strip. But one thing is very important, that Israel is not going to accept any mediation even from Israel until unless they have shown they are neutral. As on today, that neutrality factor has come into doubt. As far as the issue of basically hostages is concerned, now this is a $1 million question as to how this problem of hostages will be resolved. Because time and again, Hamas has given indication they are ready to release hostages, but they want those 6,000 Palestinians which are in their prison. And so is the Iran. Both are claiming to say that we are ready to swap, but not less than 6,000 Palestinians which are in prison. Is Israel ready to accept that? I don't think as on today it is ready to accept that proposal. But overall, it looks like that every country, whether it is China, whether it is Russia, whether it is today Yemen or Oman, they all are trying to show that they are relevant, they are giving some sort of a proposal, but whether it is acceptable or not, this time will only tell. But what has happened in Russia is quite surprisingly, the Russia calling Hamas and Iran. And as far as Israel is concerned, I don't think it will go very well as far as Israel is concerned. Because Israel, though a friend of Russia, but especially after Russia-Ukraine war, the tilt of Russia is more toward Iran, especially because the weapons which Russia has got from Iran has put them onto this axis of China, Russia and Iran. Uday.
All right, let me in fact take that to Pathikrit Pine as well. Pathikrit Pine, your interpretation of what really led Russia to urge this meeting to happen on its soil. Do you believe they are the ones who brokered the meeting in the first place, or was this meeting anyways going to happen between Iranian leaders and Hamas, which would then lead the question as to why Russia was so keen that it happened on their soil? Pathikrit.
Uday, that's a very interesting question, that they could have met anywhere, but they chose to meet in Russia. Frankly speaking, I think for Russia, it's an extension of what's happening in the Russia-Ukraine region in terms of the conflict. So for a long time, they have seen the Western interference and how the war is happening over there, which Ukraine could not have waged without the support of the West, which Ukraine could not have continued without the support of the West. And it all boils down to the issue of NATO expansion. So I think Russia would have, in any case, never, stopped from taking or seizing the opportunity of playing a role in Middle East. But we also have to understand that that Iran is a very, very major protagonist in Middle East. Whatever is happening right now would not have been possible without active support, interference, training of Iran. And if there is any country which has considerable sway and influence over Iran, then it is not United States or the West, it is Russia. So if invariably you have to bring some kind of a mediation or stop to what is happening right now, and the potential flare-up that it can lead to in terms of a regional conflict, then Russia would definitely have to play a role in terms of a mediator. Whether Russia would play a constructive mediator or whether Russia would play the same game what the Americans tried to play or the West tried to play rather, so far as the Ukraine-Russia conflict is concerned, that's a big issue. See, in this case, I think it's not very easy for Russia also to take a decision, because Russia, everything said and done, would not be very willing and happy to see Hamas having an upper hand, because Russia itself faces a considerable amount of threat from radical Islamist terror groups. So it's a very, I think it's a very paradoxical situation. It's a double whammy for Russia. They cannot disown Iran, especially because of the conflict with Ukraine and the kind of support, weapon systems, especially the loitering munitions and drones that they have received from Iran. So Russia would definitely play a role, but whether it would stop only at showing that, look, we have tried to play a role, I cannot do more than that, or whether they would desperately want something to happen so that the war ceases, it's an interesting thing to see. See, let me tell you, as the war continues and the potential regional flare-up, potential regional shape of the conflict takes, a more dangerous turn, and if the oil prices go up, there would invariably be crisis in the energy market. It would definitely benefit Russia, because any kind of rise in price of oil helps Russia right now, and it would help them in terms of salvaging some of the challenges that their economy is facing. But I think what's going to happen possibly is that Russia would play a role of negotiation here on the condition that we would try to stop it in Middle East if the West stops helping and supporting Ukraine in the conflict over there. So Russia would not come as a Santa Claus and try to sort it out. There would definitely be a bargain that they would seek for. What are the different dimensions? We have to look for it. Iran has its own dimension, because Iran wants to go to Russia simply because they also need to show that some of the major P5 members are with them. Russia would definitely do a bargaining game. Whether it would stop the conflict from taking a regional turn, that is something we have to wait and watch, because I don't think the Israelis will back down. Neither the Hezbollah or the Hamas or even Iran is willing to back down. It's a double whammy for many of the Arab states, simply because even if many of them want Hamas to be cut down to size, they cannot officially take a stand in favor of Israel, because it would create another round of Arab Spring. So let me tell you, there are no quick fix solutions of what is happening in Middle East. Everybody would try to play their role. We cannot expect Russia to remain silent. They are doing what they can do. If it helps in sorting out the problem, if it helps in mitigating the challenges, all the good. But we should not be surprised that Russia is willing to play a role. Hamas, whether it's a real representation of Palestine, that's a big question, because in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, it was Fatah Party, which is the political wing of PLO, actually imposed sanctions on Hamas itself because of the atrocities that Hamas has done. So it is, I think it's an evolving situation. It is very difficult to draw conclusions right away, but I think as things move, it will become far more complex. Uday.
Yes, Professor D.K. Giri, quickly roping you in here, what do you believe transpired in this conversation, and what next in this conflict, sir? What next, shape or twist is going to happen in this conflict with this dialogue taking place? Obviously, with a state like Iran that is soft to Hamas, that is soft to Palestinian cause, and Iran, beg your pardon, Israel disapproves of completely.
Well, I have slightly different take. The objectives of Israel aggression have to be acknowledged and have to be recognized. Their objective, first, they have three objectives. First objective is to exterminate Hamas, and eliminate their military capacity so that they cannot repeat what they did in 7th October. So there is no negotiation will work until Hamas surrender or they defeat Hamas. So Russia trying to mediate, actually I don't give any credence, and it will cut no ice. I do not think Russia is a friend of Israel. We all have bilateral relations. We are trading with China even now, although we have border disputes. But to say that Russia is a friend of Israel, it is not correct. You know, the Security Council resolution, Russia proposed that they did not mention Hamas. And Russia is fighting a proxy war with America, and Israel a friend of America. That is for sure. And mind you, Iran is supporting Hamas now. But Hamas are originally patronized by Qatar. They are Sunnis, and Qatar was funding them with some tacit approval from Israel. That is another story. The proxy of Iran are actually Hezbollah, but now Iran also is supporting Hamas. But Iran will play its role. So Iran might even come into the conflict. But I am quite clear, you know, looking at all reports and researching on the issue, Israel now will not stop until Hamas surrender or to completely eliminate Hamas. So no negotiation is going to work. I heard the interview of Netanyahu to Piers Morgan, and he said that, you know, we made a mistake of listening to world. We are not going to do it anymore until we eliminate Hamas. Then they say military capacity, they are not going to stop. So Russia trying to be a mediator actually has no weight, and it will not carry in weight. Russia is in a very dire situation. It so happened that they had a meeting there, but Russia has become almost a satellite state of China. It is tacking on to China, and Russia has to survive its own war, which is fighting for more than a year with one of its former states in Ukraine. So I don't think this mediation has any future, or it will have any impact on the war. You will soon have a ground operation, and we are all missing. We are not discussing Palestine here. We are discussing Hamas. Who represents Palestine? What will happen to Palestine after the Hamas, this war comes to some conclusion? Then only we can talk about it. Israel is talking about it. Once we finish off Hamas, then we will bring back the Palestinians to whoever have fled to south, or whoever, they will bring it back and see who runs Palestine. Maybe a UN administration or some kind of political arrangement has to be made. So we are not discussing the future of Palestine, we are discussing Hamas. And the story begins from 7th of October. I mean, there is a story, a lot of commentators saying that Israel also a terrorist state, it is happening for 75 years. We know all that. But this story begins from 7th October. What happens in 7th October is an entirely terrorist act, and Israel is going to retaliate. They were caught unawares, their intelligence failed, all that, but they have gathered together and they are fighting with all their force. And this is their fight for survival, their existence. No mediation will work until Hamas surrender or the finish of Hamas. That's my point.
Right. Also, you know, now with the fact that Russia was so keen to have this meeting on its soil, Ambassador Sikri, and the fact that, you know, Israel is calling Russia's act of host as support for terrorism, quote unquote, in their words. Yes, Professor D.K. Giri also, of course, agreeing with that point. Which direction, though, Ambassador Sikri, would this conflict now take?
Well, I agree on one point that Israel is definitely determined, A, to get back its hostages, and B, to completely end the terrorist organization Hamas. These are certainly Israel's objectives. But as we have seen that in the Gaza Strip, the Hamas uses the Palestinian people as a shield. So they put them in front and they use them as a shield. And as a result, there's a tremendous loss of life, a tremendous cruelty being inflicted on the people of Palestine. Even hospitals are used as headquarters and so on by the Hamas. This is well-known tactics that Hamas has been following for a long time. So in the face of this, there's a huge outcry from many countries of the world. We saw a statement by the UN Secretary General which so enraged Israel that they asked the UN Secretary General to resign. So all that is there, but we also know that Israel has now for the first time allowed humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip from the southern border with Egypt at the Rafah crossing. So obviously there are pressures at work on Israel. Israel has its objectives, which are very clear, but there are tremendous pressures at work, not only from the world community, but also from Israel's biggest supporter, the USA. President Biden himself advised Israel that do not make the mistakes that USA made after 9/11. So there is a lot of pressure, and one has to recognize that part of what Russia is trying to do is to build up this pressure and to say that trying to say that Hamas is willing to negotiate and Hamas is willing to actually be a better organization than the terrorist organization that most in the world think that they are. So these are pressures and counter pressures, but at the moment Israel is full force. The news from last night in the Gaza Strip is that the Israeli forces have entered there. There are tanks there. We don't have very much news on the outcome because even internet and all communications seem to have been cut with the Gaza Strip. So it is a very, very difficult and cruel situation. The world wants an end to the violence, and the world and Israel definitely wants that Hamas's action as a terrorist organization need to be recognized and taken on board by the world, because I agree that such terrorist actions should never be allowed to be repeated. But simultaneously, we do know that if we want the Palestinian people to have a voice, then they must have a two-state solution within just negotiated and secure borders. So if you want a solution, you have to have that as well. And for that, a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people is very vital. So these problems also have to be solved, and it's all the time the violence is increasing. People are losing their lives, and the situation in the Gaza Strip is very dangerous. The hostages are still there. So it's something where I think there are other countries. Qatar itself is trying to be a mediator. Russia is trying to assert its relevance. There's no doubt about that. I doubt there'll be any success to this effort, but that's what they're trying to do. But let us agree that it is going to get much worse before it gets any better.
Yes. Okay. Major General Sivaj, your quick closing comment on the direction that this is headed now. This conflict is headed. With the geopolitics now that we're seeing play out.
As far as this conflict is concerned, Uday, Israel has made up its mind. It has got one main objective, is to completely finish off Hamas. And why it is, and for that it has to do a ground action. There is no denying that fact. But why it is delaying ground action is there are three reasons. One is the fate of hostages is still not clear. It cannot take chance that it entered into Gaza Strip and then the Hamas start killing basically the hostages which are there with it. The second thing is, remember that there are tunnel defenses. The resistance is very heavy as far as Gaza is concerned, easy to get in and very difficult to win there. And therefore, they want to reduce the resistance of Hamas by bombarding with the air power as well as rockets and missiles. By the time they enter, that Hamas is decimated to almost 20 to 30%. That is a very, very important reason. Third thing is they want to prepare themselves. They already sent their special forces. They are conducting now a small incursion inside it. They are just now waiting for an opportunity wherein once they isolate complete Gaza Strip from all, then they are going to enter. But one thing is very clear, Uday, that their aim is very clear. They will wipe off Hamas. Whether they succeed or not, time will only say, but they are not going to be dictated by anyone, including their natural ally, which is the US. They will go inside it. And what the actors and characters will play a role, that will also know. To me, it looks like the longer this war takes place, disadvantage to Israel, advantage to Hamas, because the Muslim world start getting together as the casualties of Palestine increase, and Hamas very cleverly is using all these civilians as a human shield, and majority of their military stations are in those areas which is a civilian area. So therefore, the problem is the moment Israel get into Gaza Strip, there will be more casualty of Palestinians, and that will antagonize the whole world and also the Muslim world in Middle East. That is a big cause of worry as far as Israel is concerned. Notwithstanding that, Israel's aim is very clear: eliminate Hamas to completely to a level that it does not have a guts and courage to repeat what happened on 7th October. Uday.
All right. Last word to you, and then I need to take a break, Pathikrit.
Let me tell you one thing. The issue is not, I think it's a foregone conclusion. We all know that Israel wants Hamas to be decimated. But I don't think the Arab states will simply sit quiet if it happens, because it's very difficult to distinguish between an innocent Palestinian and a Hamas, operative. So when the casualties go up, what happens then? We know Hezbollah will come in. We know the Houthis will come in. We know the Iranians will not sit quietly. So there will be an exponential flare up in the whole region. And for most of the Arab states, their population is getting extremely agitated. Even if these monarchs may not take a strong stand against, Israel, officially they would say statements. But if these people want to come in to fight on behalf of Palestine, we have seen what's happening in the Jordanian border. It will be a whole chaos in the Middle East. Let me tell you right now, nobody is in control. Nobody can say, I can solve the issue. Nobody is in control. And
yes.
So we can only witness a flare-up, which is very difficult to control beyond a point.
Right. 20 seconds to you, Professor Giri.
Going to happen, really, except Iran, no other Middle East countries will jump into the fray. And Iran and America, they already have a spar. America has started bombing Iranian sites, except Iran. I don't think, given the geopolitical complexity in the Middle East, we know it for many years. There was one war where 6 countries challenged Israel and they lost it. So I do not think it will be localized. And finally, Israel would succeed in eliminating them. There are casualties. There would be a challenge, but they are prepared for it. And I do not think, except Iran, other Middle Eastern countries will come into the play. No, they will express lip sympathy. We have seen it in the last 75 years. It's not going to happen. I think so. But it's just that how Israel conducts its operation, that is very important. And how to minimize the civilian casualty, that is a question. That's a humanitarian issue.
All right.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.